Well, all right. Good morning. It is, kind of a half and half morning in terms of the weather. We'll survive, I'm sure. It's just going to be a cloudy few days, but other than that, it's a beautiful day. Did you sing along with Karen Lafferty? Thank you, Lord, for a beautiful day. Yes, why not, right? Good morning, Jackie. Good morning, Joanne, Derek, German. Hey, Mike, how are you? It's been a while. Um, Donna, Susan, thank you guys. Appreciate so much taking a few minutes out of your busy day to just hang out and talk about the things of the Lord from His Word. I just enjoy, spending these few moments with you every weekday morning at 8:30 Eastern. So we're now getting into the serious, heavy parts here of the gospel as we make our way through the Gospel of Mark, and we're in chapter 14 and looking at the preparations for the Passover meal. So we'll pick it up in verse 10. It says, Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went off to the chief priests in order to betray Jesus to them. And when they were glad when they heard that and promised to give him money. And he began seeking how to betray Jesus at an appropriate time. And on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when the Passover lamb was being sacrificed, the disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go and prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And he sent two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the city, and a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him. And wherever he enters, say to the owner of the home, 'The teacher says, where is my guest room in which I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' And he himself will show you a large upper room furnished and ready, and prepare for us there." And the disciples went out, came to the city, and found it just as he had told them. And they prepared the Passover. And so, he goes, they do all this preparation for him to get ready. So I'm trying to think, did I want to go further? I'm trying to remember what I put down here in the terms of whatever. This whole passage here where we see Judas making plans to betray Jesus, right? It's just an amazing thing when you think about it. But before I dive into that, let me just mention here for a moment that I never fail to be amazed how Jesus is one step ahead in what he, is looking to do. And it's really a testament to his close relationship with the Father, because he knew where he was in the timetable. He knew that this was going to be his last time to spend with the disciples. And so when it came to, well, where are we going to do that? You got to realize that they were now in a time when they had to be careful. Jesus had to be careful about where he was going to go, what he was going to do, because of the fact that the chief priests and the Pharisees and the scribes, all the religious elite of his day were actively planning and plotting how to have him killed. So this all had to be done, in a very low-key way. He had to, stay on the down low until the right time. So when it came to where are we going to celebrate Passover, this had to be done in a strategic way. But clearly, the Father already had this figured out. There was someone in Jerusalem that was clearly well off, had a significant building or facility that was available. And so somehow all of this came to pass where Jesus told these two disciples what to do. And again, it just makes me so grateful that God, he's in the details. He's in the details of every aspect of our life. Nothing escapes his notice. Nothing escapes his preparation for us. And so even here we see that there was already a preparation made for this last important Passover meal that Jesus was going to celebrate with his disciples. And again, it just, for me, it's such an encouragement. And I hope it is to you as well, that when we are walking out the path, the destiny, the plan that God has for us, that we can be assured in our hearts that even if circumstances seem dire or difficult or strange, it's not taking him by surprise. There is still the plan, there is still the provision that he has for every single one of us. And so for me, that's a huge takeaway from this particular aspect of the passage here. And so we turn now to our attention of Judas and his role in the crucifixion of Christ. And clearly he had a role here, and somebody needed to do this. And it's interesting when Jesus speaks of his disciples well before all of this is taking place. I was looking at John chapter 6, where Jesus mentions this. He says in verse 67, a lot of people had walked away from Jesus at this time in John 6 because Jesus was teaching some very hard things to hear. And so he says in verse 67 to the 12, "You do not want to go away also, do you?" And Simon Peter answered him, said, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of life, and we've believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God." Jesus answered them, "Did I myself not choose you, the 12? And yet one of you is a devil." Now, Jesus meant Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was going to betray him. So Jesus knew from the beginning, when he chose these 12 men to be with him, he knew that when he chose Judas, what his ultimate role was going to be. Think about that for a moment, right? That's astonishing. But even so, betrayal is a very difficult thing. I don't know if you've experienced it, if you've had in your life the experience of someone who you trusted, who you brought very close into your life, maybe into your heart, who suddenly, for seemingly no reason, turns their back, walks away, but even more than that, speaks negatively, critically of you to others, and you find out, how they stabbed you behind your back, all of these kinds of things. Betrayal is one of the more difficult things that we have to deal with when it comes to people. And, Jesus knew what that felt like. Obviously, again, he knew in advance that it was going to happen, but that didn't make it any less hurtful, any less difficult to deal with. Because don't forget, Jesus lived with this man, as well as the other 11, for 3+ years, laughing and joking and working together and enduring all the things that they endured together. Judas was part of the missionary journeys that Jesus sent the disciples out on. I'm sure he saw miracles with his own hands and watched demons, get cast out with his word. So he was part and parcel of all of this. Yet there was still this thing in him that compromised his full devotion, his full loyalty to Jesus. And of course, people have theorized over the years, well, why would Judas do this? Why would he betray Christ? Was it the money? John also notes of Judas. I think this is in chapter 13, where that Judas was the one that had the money box and that used to help himself to some of the contents. So that when Jesus spoke to Judas at the Last Supper and said, "What you do quickly," the disciples just assumed that Jesus sent him out on some errand to buy something, since he was the treasurer. Just imagine, here's this man that's going to betray you, and yet you entrust him with the money box. I mean, wow, that Jesus would do that just speaks so hugely of the grace and mercy and love that he has in his heart for people. I think personally that the reason why Judas betrayed Christ was that he was of that group back then who believed that the Messiah was going to be a conquering king. And we've talked about that here, in other occasions, that there was a sizable contingent of people, I would say it's probably the majority of Jews at that time, held to the belief that when Messiah came, it was going to be coming as a conquering king to defeat the enemies of Israel, to establish Israel as the center of God's kingdom, from which the Messiah was going to conquer the world, basically. And that's what, the Old Testament does, prophesy that in no uncertain terms, that is what the Messiah is going to do. But there is this other picture as well of the suffering servant that probably just wasn't well understood, or people didn't associate that with the Messiah. So Judas, being of that persuasion, believing that Messiah was going to be, a political leader, a conquering king, who would set things in order and defeat the Romans and all of the enemies of Israel, it's likely that because he believed that, he felt it was necessary to force Jesus' hand, to put him in a situation where he would have to exercise his authority and demonstrate his power over the enemies of Israel. And I believe that was his primary motivation for betraying Christ, is that he wanted to force Jesus' hand, make him have to do his, Messiah work, because over these 3 years, it was clear that this wasn't going the way people expected. I mean, even John the Baptist had questions about why Jesus wasn't pursuing the conquering king aspect of his messiahship. And so, the money may have been also for Judas, it may have been a secondary consideration, but I really believe that was it. And so what do we take from that? Betrayal is a function of deception. That when people betray us, just as we see here with Judas was deceived. He thought he knew the truth, but he didn't. And he was unteachable when it came to this particular belief system. He refused to be corrected about it. The Messiah has to be a conquering king. And when people betray us, there is deception at the root of that. In some way, somehow, they have been deceived. They're believing a lie, and that lie justifies, in their thinking, in their heart, it justifies their behavior of betrayal toward us. And so we've got to recognize that that's what's going on. Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, it's disappointing. It can get us angry when people do that, because why? We value them. It's like, oh my gosh, you're taking a piece of my heart with you when you go under those circumstances. But in order for us to be able to deal with it and get past it, get over it, become free from the effects of a betrayal, we've got to see it in the right way. And the only way that it makes any sense, that speaks to the truth of the situation, is that that person became deceived about something as it relates to you and I, and that lie basically justified their actions, their behavior, their decision to betray us. And when you're able to step back and see that, that empowers you to not allow for their behavior to have a long-term effect on you. Yeah, as I say, it's going to hurt. It's going to take time to perhaps work through it. But understanding the root of it, understanding how it happened, that somehow the devil was successful in introducing deception into that person's mind and thinking, that led them into that decision to walk away in a betrayal of us. This is what happened with Judas, and this is what happens with others that we're associating with, that we're close to, perhaps, who decide at some moment to betray us. Okay. It, again, is one of the more difficult circumstances that we have to weave our way through. But understand that Jesus knows what it feels like. And he knew that he had to forgive Judas just as he forgave everyone else that participated in his crucifixion. What did he say? Well, he hung there, right? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Judas, when he realized that Jesus was not going to rise up as a conquering king Messiah, when Judas realized that Jesus was actually going to be crucified, it shook him to his core. And he realized at that point what he had done. He realized how he had been so wrong and so deceived, that he was now recognizing that it was his fault that Jesus was going to die, and he couldn't handle it. The Bible's very clear that his remorse was so great that he went out and hung himself. He committed suicide over his actions. That right there tells you that he was deceived, that he really thought that he was doing the right thing to try to force Jesus to become the Messiah that he believed Jesus was supposed to be. And that often is what happens with the person that does that. They discover at some point down the line how deceived they were. And it can provide opportunity for reconciliation. If we've allowed the Lord to heal us, if we've released them from what they did, from what they owed us, we've forgiven them, and not allowed for that hurt to remain, but allowed rather the Lord to come and heal us, there may come a day when they recognize how wrong they were and actually want to come and make restitution. And, it's possible. It is absolutely possible to be reconciled to someone who betrayed you. I'm not saying that you'll ever have the same level of close walking or relationship with them, but at least you'll know that there was some healing, that there was something there that was amended, right? That was fixed. And that's an awesome thing when that happens. So I hope this is helpful for you. If you've experienced this in your life, to be able to get insight as to what was going on, why that happened, in terms of their deception, and being able to release them, being able to forgive them, being able, to not allow their behavior to have that kind of power in your life, and allowing the Lord to really heal your heart of what you experienced. That's just an amazing thing. So I hope that encourages your heart today, and that you'll receive that for yourself in whatever way makes sense for you. So thanks again for hanging out. It's been great as always. Like let's say good morning to the rest of our morning crew, our breakfast club. Susan, good morning. Jennifer and Jane, good to see you. Jack, how you doing as well? Melody and Joan, how are you? There's Marie. Good morning. Thank you all. I appreciate it so much. If you would, be my Share Bear buddy and share the video, and also reach out if you'd like to chat about any of this. Maybe you need some extra help in overcoming, a betrayal that you experienced in your life. I'd love to be part of that if you need the help. So feel free. So have an awesome day. It's been good to hang out, as I said, and look forward to doing it again tomorrow, 8:30 Eastern. Until then, you be blessed.